I'm aware that I can be a broken record, but there's only so much about me that's interesting. Heck, the word interesting is probably a stretch. I'm not amusing or attractive or fascinating or even middling. I'm pretty boring, to be honest. I do the same things, I go to the same kinds of places, I think about the same things over and over. I am redundant, unnecessary, and inessential. But I'm still me, and I still like my very boring circles. One of those humdrum circles has me looping back to a love of mine. She has a few miles on her, but she isn't ancient. She's aged remarkably well, actually, and she's beautiful. Her exterior is dark and perfectly imperfect. Her interior, once you're allowed inside, is deep and brilliant, but also surprisingly light. She's from another time, but thankfully she still stands in mine. I fell for her the moment I saw her. A lot of what's on social media is impersonal and distant. I don't mean that as an insult. It can be great entertainment, and that's exactly what a lot of it is created for. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Recently, though, I came across something that hit me hard and felt very personal. The collapse of the bell tower on this beautiful old school building, the Fairview Combined School. This sucker was built in the early 1900s and has lasted well over 100 freaking years. It sits in the middle of a large open field across the road from a cemetery. I really can't remember how I first discovered this place, but I fell for it as soon as I laid eyes on it. It would be right at home in Little House on the Prairie, but it could also fit into any modern Netflix horror anthology. It's a stunning old building, or at least it was. I just scrolled mindlessly on my phone and came across a recent picture of it. It was instantly recognizable, but I didn't want it to be what I knew it was: dying. The exterior boards always gave off a spirited bluish hue, but now they looked gray and lifeless, like the blood had been drained from its veins. The center tower that held the proud bell was completely gone, falling in on the building itself and bringing down a huge piece of the roof as it went. It was still an eye-catching building, but it looked like the end was near, and I felt like I needed to pay it a visit. It's sort of like the need to visit a sick relative when you know the end is coming. It's not like you can do anything, but you feel compelled to pay your respects, and that's exactly what I needed to do to my old friend. I arrived early on a Sunday morning. It was summertime, and even this early, the Tennessee humidity was heavy enough to take your breath. Thankfully, the old school was enough to keep me going. I walked around the building, making a full circle to see what kind of shape she was in all over. She really had gone downhill. The fallen bell tower is the main problem, but it's almost like that tower was the beginning of a cancer that had spread throughout the walls. Everything about the building seemed to be losing life. It was somber, but I tried to remain upbeat just in case she still had any feeling left. When I made it all the way back around to the front, I gave a long look at the doorway. The tower had been directly above the only entrance into the building. I could see rubble and broken wood just inside the door, but it wasn't completely blocked. I could still go inside. Yeah, it was a dumb idea, but I'm not used to making good choices, so why start worrying about that now? In the back of my mind, I knew that there was the possibility the whole place might come down on top of me. I guess there was always that chance in here, but it was a billion times greater now that she was on her last legs. I needed to be careful. I might have a twisted fascination with death, but I don't want to die just yet. It's actually the one thing that terrifies me: death. But somehow, the old Fairview School still feels okay to venture into. I trust her. She wouldn't do me wrong. I walked inside and was immediately taken back to my past visits. The smell is what hit me first. It's a mixture of mold, lead paint, and cat piss. Maybe now you can understand why it's so intoxicating. Beyond the smell, it's the eerie silence that draws me straight back to those old memories. If you've ever been in an abandoned building, you know that quietness. I'm talking about the complete and utter lack of any noise. There's not even that faint hum of electricity. The only sounds you can hear are your own footsteps and your own thoughts. That's the real intoxication of these places, the quiet and peaceful solitude. A person can go mad in a place like this and it will be completely acceptable. There's just you and the silence. "Well, hello," said the silence. Silence doesn't usually say hello. Silence doesn't typically have a voice any different from my own. "Hello," I answered. At first I was greeted with nothing, but then I heard fingers walk across the keys of an old piano. That piano was one of my favorite things in this school. To be fair, it was mostly empty, but that piano was amazing. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it was lively. It looked like it belonged in a saloon in South Texas ghost town, but it lived here in rural Tennessee. After a few notes from the dead piano, the silence spoke again. "I've been waiting on you. I thought I was too late. Looks like I was just too early," said the silence. I started to answer, but I really didn't know what to say. I admit I should have taken off like a bat out of hell, but I stuck around to see a man kind of fade into sight in front of me. It wasn't as if he instantly appeared. It was more like he had always been there, but I hadn't focused my eyes on him. "You're asking yourself what I'm doing here. Well, my friend, I'm waiting on you, just as I said. I wanted to ask about your life. I wanted to know what you've amounted to in these last decades," said the silence, which now looked like a man. A very handsome man. He was decked in a white tailored suit with a black tie and a single black pin above his left breast pocket. I couldn't tell his age. He was somewhere between 35 and 55, but I couldn't decide if he was older than he looked or younger than he acted. He was a puzzle. I looked him over before answering. I still really just didn't know what to say. He didn't feel frightening. He actually felt reassuring somehow. I didn't hate his presence, truth be told. The stranger smiled as he met my silence with his own. He walked across the room and pulled 2 old desk chairs from the wall, pushing one to me while he sat down in the other. He took off his white hat and placed it gently on the floor by his feet. The hat perfectly matched his suit. The black hat band was a twin for his thin black tie. Strangely, he wore no shoes. His bare feet somehow remained spotless against the old and dusty floor. "Well, my boy, what has your life been? What have you done with yourself?" he asked, breaking the silence that he held since his initial greeting. "What exactly do you mean?" I answered his question with my own. "Ah, poor boy, I expected you to be smarter than this. It's a simple question. Perhaps I should introduce myself in order to warm up the conversation. My name is Belial, but you shall call me Old Nick. I've traveled a long distance to meet you, to ask you a favor," said the man who I shall call Old Nick. I sat across from him and watched as he began to reach into his coat pocket, but he stopped himself, and instead he put his hands together like an old man telling a story to a group of children. "I'll get to the favor soon enough. First, I would like to know what your life has consisted of until this very point. You can't lie or skip a beat. I've already seen it all. I know every detail, but I want to hear it from you," said Old Nick. "You know what? I've wrangled a ghost in West Virginia, a nest of drug-using vampires in Texas. I've even battled my own regrets in New Orleans. I can recount my life story to this demon if that's what he wants. The only thought now, where do I begin?" I guess I should just ask him. "I don't know what to tell you," I admitted. "I'll make it simple, my boy. Let's skip the little details. I don't need to know the trivial stuff, the mundane minutiae of every day. That's boring. Let's get to the good stuff. The sins, the contrition, the sorrow." He paused for a moment to add emphasis to what he said next. "Let's talk about your first memory of death," said Old Nick. "My stepmother? She died in a car accident." No, even before that. Think for a moment. Your first brush with death was more distant, but still close enough to feel those bristles across the skin of your arm, old Nick interrupted. I thought for a moment. It didn't come to me in a flash, but I am starting to see the memory. It's buried deeper than some of the others, but not so far down that it's out of reach. I remember the stuffy funeral home. I can see the flowers. Flowers are everywhere. They're kind of pretty, but it feels weird to have something pretty at a funeral. They smell good too. That also feels out of place. The floral scents, mixed with the smell of all these people packed in a room that's too warm, it's suffocating. My grandmother's sister? I remember. I had forgotten, but now I recall. I didn't know her, but I remember going to visit her in California a year before she died. We stayed at her house. We even went to Disneyland. I still have those tickets to Disney. I answered old Nick as the memory began flooding back into my brain. That's the one, my boy. That's where you began, old Nick said as he laughed and moved his hand back towards his coat. This time, he finished the motion and pulled out a photograph. He laid it gently on the wooden slats that made up the floor of the old school and used his naked foot to slide it in my direction. This photo, it's from that trip to California. I haven't seen any of these pictures in years, I said to him as I picked the photograph from the floor. This was a picture I had taken from an old 110mm camera. It was a blue camera meant for a kid. It even had Mickey Mouse on it. My mom gave it to me just before we went to California. I used the hell out of it on that trip. This particular photo captured my mom, my grandmother, and my grandmother's sister, who passed away a year later. This is a gift from me to you. Don't let it derail your thoughts. Please continue on, dear boy, said old Nick. I was joking earlier when I called him a demon, but I'm starting to think that's what he is. I remember being confused at the funeral, I told old Nick. It was very boring and felt like it took hours. The weird part was that everyone seemed to be okay. I didn't really know the lady, but I didn't feel like things should be okay. People were joking and laughing as they told stories. Now I see what they were doing. I didn't know that a person could actually smile from ear to ear, but old Nick seemed to be doing exactly that. Makes sense. I'm not sure that he's human. I'm still leaning in favor of him being a demon. That smile he's giving right now is further proof that something is at least a little bit off with him. And just what is it? What did you see in the human race for the first time? Asked old Nick. Mourning? Every person there was mourning in their own way. They were trying to remember the good stuff, I told him. His smile still hadn't faded. No, that isn't it, my boy. Dig deeper. What did you discover about people that day, he asked. I was let down that day. I expected there to be no laughs or smiles. People were lying to themselves. They were only pretending to be okay, I answered. His smile grew wider, somehow, and he leaned back in his old wooden chair. As he did, I noticed the wall behind him. There were large windows all throughout the schoolhouse. Most of them were missing glass. The few that still had panes in the window were cracked and busted. They'd been shattered by kids or vandals or simply by time. But now, the two large windows behind old Nick were whole. Maybe somebody had replaced those since I was here last. Maybe I just didn't notice when I came in. And how does disappointment feel? Asked old Nick. That's an unusual question. What person hasn't experienced disappointment? Who can live without tasting it and knowing how it feels when it rubs against your mind? The disappointment that day, I asked? Old Nick sat upright in his chair again. He leaned down towards me. It was almost like he was inspecting me. He traced his lips with his right index finger before he spoke again. I hadn't noticed until now that his fingernails were painted white to match his suit. Not that day. Not really, said old Nick. No. How does disappointment taste, generally speaking? He asked me while waving his hand away from his face in the way someone would brush off an annoying gnat. I had to think for a moment before telling old Nick that disappointment is a deep subject. It's a deep feeling. My boy, he laughed. We have time for deep subjects. For such a pleasant-looking fellow, he doesn't make me feel so at ease any longer. Disappointment hurts. I don't know how to describe it. Not exactly. It's painful, but not in the same way as a cut on your finger or a broken toe, I said to old Nick as I leaned forward in my own chair. I thought I could hear children outside. That doesn't seem likely this early on a Sunday morning. Please, continue, said old Nick politely. Well, disappointment can be like heartbreak. I guess it really depends on who disappoints you, I said. Who? Who disappoints you? Old Nick put his hand to his chin for a moment. You didn't answer what disappoints you. So it's people. It's someone that disappoints you. It can be people or things, but in my experience, it's usually people. To be honest, it's usually myself. I disappoint me more than anyone else, I told him. Yes, I thought so, old Nick said as his smile returned. You were disappointed that day. Disappointed in others at such an impressionable young age. And of course, disappointed in yourself for believing people would behave differently. Tragic. It really is, he said through his smile. He got quiet for a moment, and I swear I heard children again. I looked around the building, even looked outside through the huge clear windows. There weren't any children anywhere. The only thing I noticed were a few school books stacked on a couple of the old desks. Some kids must have been playing in here before the bell tower crashed into the roof. Strange that I hadn't noticed the books before now. Or the desks. So tell me, please, what disappoints you the most about yourself? Requested old Nick. I began to speak, but old Nick held out a hand in a grin, asking for my silence for just a moment. He rose to his feet and pulled an old crate in front of his chair before sitting back down. He leaned back, crossed his fingers behind his head, and propped both feet on the crate. He was making himself more comfortable, the same way you would do before you get to the good part of your favorite movie. Once he had satisfied himself with his position, he nodded for me to speak, as if giving permission. This isn't easy to answer, I said, but old Nick wasn't about to interject this time. He was invested, but he wasn't interested in leading the witness. He wanted to see where I would take him, though it felt like he already knew where all this was going. The thing is, I wasn't lying. It's not that I don't have plenty I could say here, but I don't know that I can put it all into words, and I don't even know if I should. And I swear I keep hearing children playing. I thought for a moment I even heard a grown-up talking to the kids, as if leading a class. I'm pretty sure I'm screwed up, I finally told old Nick. I disappoint myself by not being normal. I don't want to think some of the thoughts that are in my head. There's a lot of negative thoughts, but I'm not all negative. I miss people. I regret situations that I created that turned people away. I wish I knew how to better deal with people. No, deal isn't the correct word. I wish I could handle myself better so I wouldn't overwhelm the ones that were close and eventually left. Old Nick was overjoyed with the words I spilled into the room. This was music to his ears. He wasn't hiding that. I decided to continue. As uncomfortable as he made me, there was also something that made me feel good about his happiness. The truth is, I told him, I think I can get obsessed with people, but I also think people believe I enjoy solitude. That's just not true. I'm comfortable with being by myself. I'm okay being alone, but I don't crave solitude. What I really crave is attachment, I told old Nick. It's deep attachment that you crave, asked old Nick. Rare bond attachment. You need that, yes? I don't know that I need it, but I want it, I answered. And when you have it, you lose it, he asked. Usually, yes. I have it, and then I lose composure, and then I let somebody down. That's usually how it goes, I told him. Old Nick jerked his legs away from the crate and pulled back in his chair in laughter. It was as if he was watching comedy unfold right in front of his eyes. His eyes were so dark, too. I couldn't tell if they were a deep shade of brown or if they were actually black. Continue, he pleaded. Tell me, how do you feel when the coffin closes? I feel lots of things, usually in waves. There's disappointment. That usually makes me mad. Then that boils until the water spills, and then it ends with depression, I told old Nick. Yes, that one. That's one of my favorites. Depression, said old Nick. I love when it's not built into you from the beginning, but sewn in by life. That's one of my most loved passages, old Nick told me. He was clapping now and really enjoying himself as he rose again from his chair. This time he walked behind me and grabbed a bright red apple from the teacher's large desk. I could have sworn that desk had been crushed, but not by the bell tower. That large wooden teacher's desk had already crumbled into dust the very first time I came into this school. Maybe somebody had replaced it over the years. Still, it seems odd to have missed another big detail when I came in here today. Old Nick bit into the apple, snapping me back to what is here instead of how it got here. He walked back to his chair and nodded for my story to continue as he ate. I watched for a second as juice ran down from the apple, down to his pale hands and onto his suit, but it left no stains or marks on the white cloth. I don't remember his hands being so pale before. They really weren't white, more like a soft gray. Tell me about your depression, dear boy, old Nick said. That strange pause before the word depression made me more uncomfortable than I already was. It's like a hum in the back of my head that never goes away, I told him. There are days when it's quiet. Those days feel like I'm standing in line for a brand new roller coaster. Mostly I'm feeling fine, but I'm anxious about what's at the front of the line. And while I'm waiting, there's somebody a few people behind me. They're humming a song that I don't like. That person is depression. But so is the roller coaster. I know it's still back there, even on the quiet days. I also know it's in front of me. I'm walking away from it and toward it at the same time, I told old Nick. We're getting to the juicy part, said old Nick, as he took another bite of that apple. I think he's referring to the story more than the apple. Tell me what happens on the loud days, he said between bites. On loud days, there's nothing but to focus on the wait. The hum becomes a roar. That's really all I have to say about the loud days, I told him. I can't explain to myself why I've told him anything at all today, but I really don't want to go down this road of thought. Lyle slammed his feet hard to the floorboards of the schoolhouse as he rose from his chair. He grabbed a pencil from a student desk and stabbed it deep into what was left of the apple. Where did that desk come from? Where did all these desks come from? All of a sudden, I'm surrounded by a classroom full of these desks. It's those old-style desks where yours is attached to the seat in front of you. I don't remember any of these being here before. No, that won't do. You can't keep the best part of the story from me. Tell me about the gun. Tell me what it tells you on those loud days, Lyle yelled before seating himself back down. This time he chose the teacher's desk at the front of the room. There was another apple on the desk, bright red and fresh, just like the first one. He wrapped his fingers around it and took a bite before reaching into the desk drawer. He pulled out a pistol, tossed it across the room in my direction. I recognize it. It's mine. I've held it to my head. I'm not proud to say, but I've tasted the barrel in my mouth. You can decide if it was cowardly to think of suicide, or if the cowardly act was not pulling the trigger when I had the chance. I'm still undecided. Pick it up. Tell me what it says when the only thing you can hear is its song in the back of your head, Belial yelled. I don't want to talk about this, I said to him in a statement that was the truest thing I've told him today. But without realizing it, I had already walked to where the gun sat on the floor and picked it up. Now I stood in the center of the desks, gripping this gun that I've held so many times before. It always feels cold against my head, I told him. When I press it against my temple and pull it away again, that cold feeling stays longer than it should. It's like if you hold ice in your hand for a few seconds. You can still feel the ice when you've dropped it. That's what it feels like to hold this against my forehead, I told Belial. I started to raise it to my head now. I can't tell you why. I just felt compelled to do so. Habit, I guess. No need for that now, my boy, old Nick said as his voice returned to softness. There's no need to do that any longer. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but I ignored his voice and touched the barrel to the skin of my face. It's strange that I can't feel that same cold I'd felt every other time I've done this. Somehow, that disappointed me, and I pulled the gun away from my temple. I don't want to die, I told him. I've never wanted that. I think I used the thought of suicide to trick myself into thinking I'm in control. It's like a pressure release valve. Something I hold on to that lets me believe I can do this when it gets to the point that I can't hold anything else any longer. But the truth is, I want to live forever. I'm more afraid of dying than anything else in the world, I admitted to old Nick. Then tell me, boy, why do you hold death so close? Old Nick asked. It's the only thing that I know will never leave, I answered immediately. Have you ever heard the word guffawed? It's one of those dumb words that nobody would dare use in the modern world. I certainly never expected to ever use that word in my life, but if I had to describe old Nick's reaction, he guffawed. When he finished laughing, he looked me in the eyes with a very pleased countenance. I didn't expect to use that word either. You share a bond with death, you think? A relationship? A man cannot escape his shadow. It seems death to be your shadow, old Nick said. I answered him, I guess I do have a relationship with death. Not really a healthy relationship, but I always know it's there. I suppose it's a shadow. I can't get away from it, no matter how fast I run. He'd finished his second apple by now, tossed the core across the room where it landed in a small metal garbage can. I swear that can wasn't there. I'm positive none of this stuff was here. So, dear boy, if death is the shadow you cannot escape, then of course it is the one thing that will never leave you. But though it cannot leave you, surely it can let you down, old Nick asked. I was quiet. If I didn't want to follow my thoughts earlier, I surely don't now. He's correct. Death has let me down. Death has forced me to make decisions that no one should be expected to make. I stared in silence at the wooden slats in the floor until I was awoken from my depressive trance by the clang of a penny against my desk. Old Nick had tossed it in my direction. I picked it up to look at it. The year stamped under Mr. Lincoln was 2011, the year my dad died. A penny for your thoughts, joked old Nick, in one of the more tasteless jokes I've ever heard. You know my thoughts, I answered him. I'm not sure how, but you already know what's on my mind, I told old Nick as I played with the penny between my fingers. Ah, boy, you're correct. But I so love to hear the storyteller recount his tale. Please continue, I implore you, old Nick requested. This penny was pressed in 2011. I had already walked with death, but that year I held its hand. Death and I became close, I said. Old Nick rose from the teacher's desk and walked in my direction. I could see another penny in his hand, and the same handsome smile on his face. When he reached me, he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder and gently put the new penny on the desk in front of me. It was face down, so I couldn't see Mr. Lincoln. Won't you please turn it over for me? Old Nick asked, referring to the second penny. I hesitated, but not for long. I expected the year on this penny to be 2023, the year my mom died, and I was correct. Old Nick gave my shoulder a squeeze, the way someone would reassure a child if their dog had just died. I didn't like it. "What did Death do when those coins were stamped?" asked Old Nick. "You already know what Death did. Death took my parents." I threw those words back at him as he released his light grip on my shoulder and walked back to the teacher's desk. "Did Death take them? Or were they sent to death? Please remind me, child," said Old Nick calmly. I didn't like this subject, but I also didn't appreciate Old Nick calling me child while talking about my parents. But he's right. He's just as right in this as he has been about everything else he's brought up. Death didn't take either of my parents. I sent them with Death. I made the decision for them to go, and I have been carrying the blame for their deaths all this time. Old Nick knows this. He's seated back at the head of the classroom with his hands clasped together as if he's about to pray, but he's not reaching out to anyone. I think he's anticipating the next part of my story. "I killed them, both of them," I answered, but my answer was still met with silence. Well, silence and his smile. "I didn't want them to leave. I didn't want either of them to go anywhere," I told Old Nick. "I still see my dad. He visits me. He blames me for what I took from him. He's never forgiven me." "And alas, I fear he never will," said Old Nick. "And what of your mother?" he asked. "Does she visit you too?" "No," I answered. "Not like my dad. I do hear her sometimes, but she's always gone when I turn to face her," I said to Old Nick, as a few tears began to bleed from the corners of my eyes. "Dear boy, there's no need for sadness here. The blame has already been laid at your feet. You can only accept it. They both condemn you. Your father hates you. That's why he visits. And your sweet mother, taking in a rush at your decision. It was you who spoke the word, correct?" It was me. I stepped out of the hospital room and I told the nurse, a stranger, that I was ready. But that was a lie. I'm still not ready. But I am the one who forged those words with my own lips, my own voice. "We are ready." That's what I told her. But there was no we, and there was no ready. "I did," I answered Old Nick, as I placed both pennies face down onto the desk in front of me. I no longer wanted to look into their faces. "Is it humiliating to know that she hasn't forgiven you? That neither of them ever will?" asked Old Nick. "Yes, it is," I answered, but only to myself this time. I wasn't strong enough to answer this one out loud. It must be hard to live with that shame," he said. "That's a burden no man should be forced to carry." "Still, it makes me wonder," Old Nick said, without finishing his thought. He smiled as he turned to look out the nearest window. "I shouldn't say it," he said. "I shouldn't put my thoughts to words," Old Nick continued. As he stopped himself from finishing, a crash came through that same window. It was a baseball hit into the glass from children outside. I could hear them again, as clear as if they were right beside me. Old Nick caught the ball and gave the children a wave. I still couldn't see them, no matter which window I looked through, but I could still hear them out there somewhere. "Children," Old Nick said. "Children will be children. You cannot blame them. They know not what they do," he said as he winked at me and tossed the ball across the room into my hands. "Since we are on the subject of children," he finished, "I wonder what you would do if you were charged with the same decision regarding your children that you forced upon your parents," said Old Nick in a way that turned my stomach. I glared at him. I didn't want to answer. Not only that, I couldn't answer. The only decision that would make sense in that circumstance would be turning to the gun. I looked in the direction of the desk beside me, where I'd placed the gun after holding it to my head earlier. Old Nick noticed where my eyes had gone and he grinned. That was the only answer he needed. Old Nick crossed the rows of desks and walked in my direction once again. When he reached me, he pulled the baseball from my hands and carried it to a closet at the back of the room. I remember that closet being nothing more than a few old boards sticking out from the wall, but here it stood again, full of games and toys. On the wall beside the closet were posters and maps. I could learn my ABCs and also find the path which Christopher Columbus sailed to America. None of this had been here before. It hadn't belonged here for 75 years. Following the wall away from the maps and posters, I found a row of neatly hung jackets and a ball cap or two. Letting my eyes roam further across the classroom, I spotted a shelf with about 12 small paper bags, lunches for children that haven't existed in decades. I let my eyes wander till I met old Nick back in the teacher's seat with that same warm but unforgiving smile. He motioned for me to return to my desk. "Is there another type of person for which you mourn?" asked old Nick as I returned to my seat. "Perhaps someone who has not yet felt the kiss of death, but their existence departed from your own." And again, old Nick is correct in what he's assuming. I do mourn my dead parents, but I also mourn a handful of people that are no longer part of my life. Not even a handful, really. Only one or two. I didn't answer him. I kept these thoughts to my head for now. "I wonder why someone would just walk away and forget you. It's puzzling," old Nick said to break the silence I've given him. "Perhaps those people never cared for you." "Perhaps," I said as another tear rolled away from my eye, following the same path of the earlier tears. Living grief. It's a funny thing to grieve for someone who still walks the earth. It's not easy for a simple mind such as my own to comprehend, said old Nick. I don't think even the most brilliant mind can comprehend living grief. This is something that feels like it should be easier than normal grief. If a person still lives, still breathes, still has a heart that beats, there should be no mourning, even if they've walked out of your life. But that isn't the case. Not once attachment and love has set in. I'm not talking about the attachment you get for your favorite flavor of ice cream or your favorite book. I'm talking about permanent attachment, the kind where someone feels as much a part of you as your thumb feels to your hand. Losing that permanent attachment changes everything. You can no longer hold on to things as strongly without that thumb. You lose your grip. You might even slip and fall into the abyss of your own mind. And the torture of it all, that thumb still exists, just no longer for you. I do hate the silence, old Nick told me. I much prefer the sound of your thoughts to the heartbeat of this old place, he said as he motioned to the classroom around us. Have you noticed the heartbeat returning? It's such a misfortune that those you grieve, while they still live, won't return like the heartbeat of this school, old Nick finished. You're not wrong, I finally admitted. Those do hurt. I'm not sure that they hurt more than the ones who are really gone and really dead, but they hurt. And you're right, it is torture. I tell myself that there's some peace in knowing they're probably okay, at least on the good days. And are there many good days? Old Nick asked, already knowing the answer. No. Most days aren't good, I told him. That's right. Most days the knife is twisted into your heart, or so I've been told, said old Nick. Old Nick hadn't asked a question, so I didn't say anything in return this time. I just didn't feel like talking or thinking. I just wanted to shut down. He had stirred up more feelings than I had the strength to carry. I watched old Nick as he roamed around the schoolhouse. He would stand in front of an empty shelf or a table, picking something up and examining the objects that filled the once empty building. He came to a picture frame on a shelf full of books. They were encyclopedias, that same kind you would get as part of a subscription in the mail, one a month for nearly 6 months or so. The encyclopedias looked as if they belonged on that shelf, like they had always been there, but the picture frame was out of place. It felt too personal for a classroom. I couldn't tell what was captured in the photograph within that frame. I could only tell that it made old Nick smile. He pulled the frame close to his chest and hid the photo from my eyes as he grinned and walked toward me in the center of the room. He placed the frame on the desk in front of me, facing away from me at first while he gave me a look to ensure I could see what he was doing. Once he was satisfied that my eyes were glued on the frame, he slowly turned the photograph to face me. It was a picture of my living grief, my thumb which had chosen to no longer be a part of my hand, a person who had chosen no longer to be a part of my life. Old Nick might as well have pierced my heart with a dagger, and the smile on his face let me know that he knew how I felt. He looked across to the neighboring desk, the one that held my gun, my release valve. He continued with his smile as he picked the pistol from that desk and placed it on the same desk that now held the photograph of living heartbeat I can no longer hear. He winked as he walked back toward the front of the room. And then we circle back around to disappointment. Is that right, dear boy? Asked old Nick. That's surely such a heavy load to carry, It's an imperfect circle, a spiral with no way in or out. I wonder how a person even enters such a loop. He paced around the room, giving my thoughts space to breathe. Earlier, I could detect his desire for me to answer verbally, but now it felt like he wanted my silence, something he confirmed by looking in my direction while giving me that same grin. What is part of that loop, dear boy? Asked old Nick while continuing to step around me in the room. Grief, of course. It's there from childhood. That's where you originally planted it. And you've cultivated it throughout your life, just as any gardener would do. You've tended the seedling, pruned the unnecessary leaves, torn away the weeds, all to protect grief. You have sown a mighty plant with that one little seed, a plant that continues to grow. You've become quite the greenskeeper with that one, my boy. You have learned how to keep it growing with the water of both the living and the dead, old Nick said to me. Still, I sat in silence. My eyes jumped between the objects on the desks around me, the gun, the photograph of my mom and her mother and her aunt, the 2 pennies, and the picture frame holding my living grief. We must not forget about depression, he said. I do wonder how it got inside. Was it grief that opened the door? Or possibly depression was already in the parlor? Perhaps depression allowed grief to settle in for good. I suppose we'll never know, shall we, child? Old Nick asked. However depression slipped in, it has been such a close companion for so very long, hasn't it? I could quite imagine it as a treasured friend, he finished. Old Nick chuckled as he spoke. I remained silent, with my eyes focusing more and more on the mementos he had laid out. I didn't want to look at him any longer. There's also loss in there, yes? He asked. It's carried separately from the grief, even though the two go hand in hand. Just like 2 star-crossed lovers, old Nick asked into the air while laughing. Loss has been the nourishment of grief. Is that how it works? Or is the other way around? I can never quite figure that one out, old Nick said. He felt more and more like a cat toying with a dying bird. I remained still in my seat, keeping my silence. I didn't want to look at old Nick or the objects anymore. My eyes went to one of the windows, the one broken by the baseball. I took a photograph out of that window years ago. It was winter, or maybe it was fall. I can't remember all the details. I just remember that oak tree outside had lost its leaves. I took a photo of that tree, framed by the dead window. It was a picture of loss framed by grief. I just didn't understand it at the time. There's also plenty of self-blame in our loop. Isn't that right? Asked old Nick. It's just to blame yourself, you know. That is where accusations belong. Right in your lap. The heaviest blame is for those who have left. Is that correct? Old Nick asked. He was enjoying this recap. He was like a man on stage at a play I didn't want to see. I already knew the plot. It was one I'd seen 1,000 times, and I didn't have any desire for a replay. Yes, that's where the heaviest blame stems, old Nick answered himself. Those who have walked away. Well, let us not forget those who you pushed away. You pushed them right into the embrace of death, didn't you, dear boy? And I suppose you pushed those living grievances away as well. Wouldn't you agree? Perhaps not into the arms of death, but it was still your fault they walked away. It was your fault they forgot you, old Nick said. He hadn't returned to his seat at the head of the room since he began his monologue. His bare feet had been softly treading around the room, but his words stomped heavily. He was showing off while I was sinking. I had been uneasy since finding him in this room, however long ago that was, and now, as he walks in my direction again, that feeling of dread multiplies. "Where does blame lead us?" Old Nick asked the class of one. "I'm sure there's something I'm leaving out. There's something important that lives within this loop which I am forgetting. Blame leads to sorrow, and sorrow leads us where?" he asked. He was now standing at the desk that held the gun, my pistol. His smile had turned more sinister, no longer forcing a fake comfort. He was now full in on tearing me down. He didn't pick the gun up, but he placed one of his long fingers gently on the trigger as the gun remained laying on the desk. He looked at me, allowing his smile to grow as he spun the pistol so the barrel was aimed in my direction. This made Belial laugh as he walked away from me and the anchors he had laid out on the desks around me. "Suicidal ideation," Belial said in the same way someone would shout about a happy discovery. "That's the one I was forgetting. So odd that you never did it. There would be no shame in letting the pressure out, you know that, dear boy? There's nothing wrong with getting rid of just a little of the weight you carry. It isn't fair for one person to hold so much," he said. He wasn't laughing now. For the first time, even his smile was completely gone. He had walked back to the teacher's desk at the front of the classroom, but he did not return to his chair. He stood there, staring at me until I finally locked eyes with him. And then, the bell rang. That old, proud bell that was once hanging in the tower at the center of the school. The same bell that had fallen and drawn me back to pay my last respects to this old building I had loved. It rang, loudly. As the bell tolled, I heard children behind me, but I never turned to see them. I kept my eyes locked on Belial as I could hear the children gathering their things somewhere behind me. I heard the rush of 20 or so little feet hitting the wooden slats of the floor as the children exited the school. After several minutes, the ringing of the bell ceased and Belial's smile returned. "You never reached for the gun again?" he asked into the room. Now that the bell had stopped ringing, Belial came across with a slightly less dramatic flair. "No," I answered. That's all I had to say to him. I did turn my eyes back to the gun with its barrel still pointed in my direction, but I didn't keep my eyes there. I looked back to Belial. I may not have wanted to see him, but I wasn't turning away from him again. "That's good, my boy. The danger of death has already passed," Old Nick said. "Do you know where you are?" asked Old Nick. "I'm in the middle of a cow pasture," I thought to myself. "I'm in the center of this one-room schoolhouse. Of course I know where I am." I didn't answer him. I only talked to myself. I'm not playing his games anymore. "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of..." Belial stopped himself. The next word in the verse is Christ, but he refused to say it. Instead, he flicked his hand through the air as if pushing away a cobweb. "That each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad," finished Belial. 2 Corinthians, I thought to myself. He's quoting the Bible at me. Well, mostly quoting. I still remained silent. "Do you know where you are, boy?" Belial asked, with anger showing in his voice. "I'm in the Fairview School. I'm in Tennessee," I began to answer, but Belial cut me off. "Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment," he shouted at me. That's Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. He continues to try and use the Bible to scare me. "I'm in a broken school," I answered. "In the middle of a..." I tried to answer again, but again he cut me off. "So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to..." Belial started, but stopped himself before finishing. That one's Romans chapter 14, verse 12. The word he refused to say was God. This verse is the accounting, referencing every man and woman who shall stand before God and give an account of everything we have done. I rose to my feet and pushed the desk away. The gun slid across the floor. The picture frame fell face down, the face of my living grief no longer watching. I am standing in a crumbling building in the middle of a... I was interrupted again. Belial met my defiance with his own. He picked the gun from the floor and hurled it through a window, breaking the glass. As the window shattered, the school around us began to decay. She was returning to her previous condition, the state I found her in when I entered today. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Belial threw those words at me. "You have stood and been deemed mine, dear boy. You are no closer to that school than you are to your heaven. You stand outside the gates of hell, and now I shall determine your fate." The bell chimed again as he finished, though this time it didn't ring from high in its tower. It rang as it crashed hard into the wooden floor of the school. The old bell was back where it belonged. I didn't know what to say to him. I can only tell you that I believed what he was saying to me. I was in damnation, or at least standing just on the other side of it. Surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble, and the day that is coming will set them on fire. Belial had returned to a whisper emitted from a grin. More verses. That's the Old Testament, the book of Malachi or something like that. I still didn't know what to say. I just know that I believed him. Somehow, I have entered immortality, and I sat in front of the throne of God, but I was not accepted. "The day has come. You have been judged, and I have been tasked with your sentencing," Belial said to me. Old Nick had returned to his theatrical ways as he strolled back to where the teacher's desk had been. Now that desk had crumbled back into not much more than dust. The room was nearly empty again, save for the two of us. "My decision has been made, my boy. I made my mind up long before you stepped into eternity. Your sentence will be simple, really. All you have to do, dear boy, is delight yourself in the hell you shall receive. After all, it was built just for you, and you shall remain there to carry all the same grief and disappointment you carried there before. You shall hold the burden of the identical depression, the aforesaid blame, and of course, the accompanying loss. I sentence you to return to the life you lived, carrying all of the same damnation you held yourself to previously," old Nick said in pure amusement. After he finished his lecture, I felt dust fall against my arm. I looked up towards the roof of the decaying schoolhouse as more dust poured down, followed by wood and plaster. I could feel the ceiling hitting hard against my shoulders. It was as if the roof had fallen down around me. In fact, it was exactly that. It was falling down around me. When I turned my head to look back at old Nick, at Belial, the room went white. Old Nick had done what he came to do. He had introduced my soul to purgatory, and now I will have to do what I was sentenced to do. I will be punished with everlasting destruction and shut out from the presence of the Lord and from all the glory of his might, back in the same hell from which I came. It takes me a moment to focus my eyes, but that incessant beeping wakes me from my sleep. Besides the beeping, I can hear a rush of people moving around me in the room. I can feel someone squeeze my hand. Why is it so hard to move? "He's waking up," I heard someone yell. They sounded pleasantly shocked. It wasn't a voice I recognized. "We had lost him," I heard from someone else. "We called the time." "How did he come back?" another voice asked. I could finally see into the room. There were nurses and a doctor crowded around. I was connected to a few machines. One of them was making that annoying beeping sound. It was like an alarm clock that nobody would hit snooze on. Nobody could survive that building collapsing like that, a nurse stated. So much of it came down on him. He was crushed, that nurse continued. Well, somehow he survived. Praise the Lord, hallelujah, this nurse said. The Lord sure works in mysterious ways, he finished. The Lord does work in mysterious ways, and so does the devil.